Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, April the 19th, 2020. It is currently 8:17 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church located in Ovalo, Texas. If you are listening to us live this morning, thank you very much. It is Sunday. It is 8:17 a.m., so what's going on? Did I start church early today? No, I did not. I came out to the church very early this morning just to go over my sermons, spend some time in Scripture, to possibly do some recording. And so here I am. And I decided once I got out here and got everything set up, I thought, I'll start my Sunday with a time of devotional study. And since I'm out here having my own personal devotional study early Sunday morning to try to kind of get me ready for the Sunday school hour, for the Sunday morning service, and for the Sunday evening service, that's 3 hours of teaching to kind of get myself in the right mindset. I'll have my own devotional time. And since I'm going to be having my own devotional time, why not hit that big red go live button and, have you join me, right? So in a way, I'm kind of opening the door saying, come on in, have a seat. Let's have my devotional time. Well, you can join in, right? I mean, I know we're social distancing during this, during the pandemic, during this COVID-19 situation, but we can come together, via the internet. You can still virtually come on in and have a seat and listen to me as I have my devotional study. Now, for those who've never listened to me do a devotional study, it's really just me having my devotional study live on the air. It's not like something I prepare and do a big, write out an entire Bible study. It's me having my devotional study. It's very real, very organic. Some people like it, some people don't. But I'm going to have my devotional study. Whether people like it or don't like it, I'm going to have my own time of devotional study. I try 4 times a day. It doesn't always work out, but I try. And when I do, I think it's an interesting experiment to just do it live on the air. So sometimes it maybe doesn't flow as well as it could if it was better produced, but that's okay. So let's do that. Now, what I have for us today is I subscribe to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of podcasts are kind of designed for more devotional kind of study. So I have one pulled up. I was getting ready to listen to it. So we'll listen to it together, and then I will allow that to just lead me into my own devotional study, and then we will expand, and we'll see where it takes us. I don't know what to expect. I haven't listened to this prior, so it may be helpful. Who knows? We may finish it, and I may sit here and go, well, that concludes the devotional study. Have you ever done that when you sit down for a devotional study? Maybe you grab a devotional guide or you listen to something, and then after you read it, you just kind of sit there going, don't really know what to do with that. I mean, there's been some situations where that has occurred, typically because of the way my brain thinks. As soon as I hear something or read something, then my brain just takes off in a million different directions. But there have been a few times, usually when I sit there and I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. That usually bothers me because I'm like, why don't I know what to do with that? So then I'll sit there and just think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it until I figure out what I'm supposed to think about it. So we will see. It's always risky doing these kinds of things live, but hey, that makes it a little bit more exciting, at least for me. Maybe not for you, but it does for me. So this comes from Crosswalk, crosswalk.com. They have a number of podcasts. In fact, we've been reviewing their podcast on how to study the Bible. And if you listened to the episode last night, you probably thought I was going to have an emotional breakdown. So I don't always agree with everything, but hey, if it gets you, since you're listening, into God's word this morning, then it's accomplished something. So let's see what they have to say. And let's have a time of devotional study, getting ready for a day of church, right? So hopefully you can join us for everything today because we're going to be doing a lot and hopefully it will all be beneficial. So here we go. Let's listen to this devotional podcast from crosswalk.com.
Hello, everyone. This is Stephen McGarvey for lifeaudio.com. We want to take a second and let you know about our latest podcast, Christians in a Time of Coronavirus, hosted by pastor and author Dan Darling. You're probably feeling a bit overwhelmed by the pandemic crisis our country finds itself in and how it affects you and your loved ones. Our prayer for this podcast is that it will help you find new ways to tap into your faith and give you strength and hope for these difficult times. If you're looking for insights as to how Christianity guides us during this present adversity, you can find Christians in a Time of Coronavirus by heading over to lifeaudio.com or checking out today's show notes.
Are your words causing others to stumble? Written by Lynette Kittle and read by Kelly Givens. Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Matthew 16:23. If you were Peter, how would you feel to have Jesus turn to you and say what he said to him in Matthew 16:23? If one of the 12 apostles could have been a mouthpiece for Satan, does it cause you to consider the possibility of the evil one trying to speak to others through your words too? But maybe you wouldn't have been so bold as to take Jesus aside and rebuke him for speaking of his upcoming death and resurrection, saying, "Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you." Of course, Jesus was really addressing Satan, who was behind Peter's words. But still, the realization of who was influencing what was coming out of his mouth must have been hard for Peter to swallow. Like Peter, it's so easy to believe an idea or thought is your own, not realizing how the enemy of your soul works to influence others through what you say. Like most Christians, it's easy to be naive of how Satan may be attempting to discourage God's will in another individual's life or trip them up in some way through your mouth. Yet Peter's example illustrates how it can happen to even those who have a personal, close relationship to Jesus. Most may think it's so obvious to spot Satan's plots, but Scripture describes how the evil one disguises himself, stating, "And no wonder, for Satan masquerades himself as an angel of light." Like Peter's words could come across as just a concerned friend trying to calm Jesus down from talking about a coming death and resurrection, you may believe you're just being helpful and advising friends. Yet in reality, you may be oblivious of how the enemy is at work through your conversation to motivate someone to stumble away from God's will. In trying to help guide a family member, friend, or coworker away from something you think is off track in their lives, having the best of intentions and trying to encourage them in the right direction, you could unknowingly be pointing them toward man's will rather than God's will. In Romans 14:13, we see that Scripture cautions us, saying, "Therefore let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of a brother or sister." So how do you keep from being a stumbling block through your words? 1 John 2:10 states, "Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble." A key to not becoming a stumbling block is to stay in the light of Christ by staying in prayer and obeying his word. As you do, 2 Thessalonians 3:3 states the Lord is faithful and will strengthen and protect you from the evil one.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Your Daily Bible Verse, a production of the Salem Web Network. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we'd love for you to head over to iTunes and rate and review our podcast. It really does help people find us. This episode was produced by our managing editor, Kelly Givens, and recorded and edited by Stephen Sanders. Be sure to come back tomorrow as we examine more of God's Word.
All right. So, an interesting passage. The passage is not interesting. Their approach to the passage was a little bit interesting, and it really got me thinking two different ways. First, and we have to address this. Let's look at the text itself, and let's kind of dig in and see where this is going. So we'll go to Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16. Peter has made his great confession. Simon Peter, because Jesus asks, "Who do people say that I am? Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" They go through all the different things that they've heard people say, and then Simon Peter makes this amazing confession: "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." All right. Jesus explains to him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven." God has revealed that truth to Peter. God has opened Peter's understanding to that. So an amazing passage right here. Lots have been discussed about this passage throughout church history. But then all of a sudden in verse 21, the narrative really changes. Because from that time, after this amazing confession, Jesus begins to show unto his disciples how he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and raised again the third day. Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, "Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee." Peter steps up and is like, "Hey, no, you're not going to die. Not going to happen." Peter doesn't want it to happen. He states it's not going to happen, and we have him literally rebuking God in the flesh. It's an amazing scene. Here's Peter rebuking God, the incarnate Son of God, the eternal Son of God, second person of the Trinity, is being rebuked, by a human being, a person who is created by God. A creation of God is rebuking the Creator. And we're all guilty of doing that with our words sometimes, right? We say things to God, about God, that we should never say, that we should never speak, that demonstrates an arrogance and a pride and a narcissistic idea that's inside of us. Sometimes we act like God should be submitting to our will. God should be doing things our way. And he doesn't like this idea that Jesus is going to die. It goes against what Peter wants. It goes against what Peter desires. It goes against what Peter wills. And we sometimes speak to God as if, "Hey, God, you should be doing things. You should be running the universe the way I want it." And we all have a tendency, even if we don't say it, a lot of the disciples may have been thinking it. Peter said it. And sometimes we think things and don't say things. And sometimes others of us always say what we think and probably shouldn't. All right. So we could talk a lot about there, but here he does this. And then verse 23, Matthew chapter 16, verse 23, then turned unto Peter, all right, Jesus turns unto Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men." Now, the devotional we just heard did an interesting thing with the text. They said, okay, Satan was behind Peter's words. And so that when Jesus is rebuking Peter, he's not really rebuking Peter, he's rebuking Satan, who's behind Peter's words. So and their way of interpreting this, which is kind of interesting, and we could have if we were all here for for my personal devotional time, we could have an interesting conversation here. But I want you to think about how this really works. So in their mind, and within seconds, Peter goes from confessing that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and in somewhere instantaneously, Satan then takes over Peter's words and speaks through Peter. And then when Jesus rebukes, he's not rebuking Peter, he's rebuking Satan. I have never read it that way. I've always read it that Jesus is rebuking Peter and basically saying, look, you're being like Satan. You're thinking like Satan. You're acting like Satan. You don't have the things of God in mind. No, you've got a completely different way of thinking. You are trying, because ultimately Jesus has told them what the plan is. Here's the divine plan. This is the divine plan from eternity. This is what I've come to do. This is the idea here is Peter is acting in a sense of Satan by trying to thwart and go against the will of God. And that is a very important concept. Give me 1 second here. I've got to turn off notifications on the iPad, or on the computer. Give me 1 second. All right. There, that's fixed. Okay. I always forget to do that, and then all of a sudden notifications start popping up, and it causes problems with the recording. So, all right. So let me state this again. According to the devotional we just heard, they make it sound like when Peter is speaking, that's Satan speaking through Peter. Now, for Satan to speak through Peter, he would have to have some kind of control, right? He would have to have some kind of control of Peter. Like, here's Peter, but Satan is speaking through him. That almost sounds like possession. That sounds like control. No way. Peter just confessed that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. God had revealed that to Peter. Clearly, Peter is spoken of here as a believer, as in some capacity. And for Satan now to kind of come in and start speaking through him, and then Jesus is literally rebuking Satan, is not rebuking Peter. That whole concept there, I'm having a hard time with. Again, the way I have always read this, and you may read it differently, and you can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com to share your thoughts. But to me, the text is Peter is speaking as Satan. He's speaking like Satan. He's thinking like Satan. Satan is against the will of God. He's against the plan of God. Satan doesn't have the things of God in mind, and Jesus has come to do this. For Peter to say, no, this is not going to happen, Peter would literally be standing in opposition to the will of God. He would be serving as an adversary to the will of God. Peter is serving as an adversary to the will of God. God's will, Jesus is to come, to die, be buried, and raise again, and to rise again on the third day. Peter's like, no, that's not going to happen. The minute Peter says that's not going to happen, puts him in opposition to the will of God. He is an adversary. He is acting as Satan, who opposes the will of God, who is against the will of God, who doesn't have the things in the will of God in mind. He does everything in opposition to it. So this is not Satan speaking through Peter. This is Peter speaking the ideals and acting as if he is Satan. That makes the most sense to me. For Satan to be speaking through Peter, he's literally would be, and for Jesus not to be even rebuking Peter, he's rebuking Satan, would be literally Satan controlling Peter. It would be, that's just, no, that does not, that's some bad theology there. So I reject their approach to the text. I reject their approach to the text. But so let's break our devotional. We're going to break our devotional down a little, two different ways. All right. I want us to consider for application. I want us to think about it from two perspectives. First perspective. And in fact, let's go to that passage. Let me pick up my Bible again. Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. Get thee behind me, Satan. This is Jesus rebuking Peter. All right, he's rebuking. In fact, he said, and like even the text says, he said unto Peter. They literally said that Jesus was speaking unto Satan. He wasn't rebuking Peter. You're reading into the text. You're reading into the text. He says unto Peter, get thee behind me, Satan. Why? Because Peter is acting like Satan. But here's what I want you to see. Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. All right? Thou savorest is the way the King James puts it. Let's look at this verse and a number of other translations. All right? Let's look at a number of other translations. Give me 1 second. We'll pull them up here. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. New Living Translation. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. You are not setting your mind on things of God, but on things of men. For you do not have, the Berean Study Bible, for you do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. The Berean Literal Bible, for your thoughts are not of the things of God, but the things of men. So let's start with first our thinking. All right. The first lesson that we can learn this morning in this devotional time is this. When it comes to your thinking, do you have the things of God in mind? Do you savor the things of God? Is your focus on the things of God, or is your thinking, is your feelings focused on the things of men, focused on the things of self? Do you constantly view everything from the vantage point of self, from the vantage point of man, what you want, what you like, the way people think? Or do you look at life through the lens of God, through the thoughts of God, through the mind of God? See, Peter, what he saw was, wait, no, Jesus, you cannot die. He wasn't thinking of this from the perspective of God, God's will, God's plan, God's eternal decrees. No, he was seeing it through his perspective. Peter's thinking was that of Satan. He didn't have the things of God in mind. No, he had the things of the flesh, things of the world, things of men in mind. That's how he viewed the situation. So when we see things, how do we perceive them? How do we see them? How do we understand them? Do we have the thinking of God or the thinking of men? Do we have the thinking of God or the thinking of self? Let me think. The way you think, let me state it this way. The way you think, would it lead to you being rebuked and Jesus saying to you, get thee behind me, Satan? Would your thinking, the way you think, would lead to Jesus telling you or calling you Satan and telling you to get behind him? Is your thinking more in line with God or more in line with Satan? Is your thinking more in line with the world or more in line with God? Is your thinking more in the line with self or more in the line with God? Now, naturally, our thinking is of Satan. Our thinking is of the flesh. Our thinking is of the world. That's our natural default position. And it takes time to develop a right way of thinking. I'm always talking about this. No matter what the situation is, coronavirus, it doesn't matter if it's a pandemic, it's an election, it's politics. We must think biblically. And so many times I think Jesus would literally come to us as Christians. We could be a group of Christians standing there talking about whatever thing is going on in the world. And Jesus would probably walk up in the middle of all of us saying, get thee behind me, Satans, plural. Get thee behind me, Satans. You do not savor the things of God. You do not think with the thoughts of God. You're thinking about this like men. Your perception is all wrong. Your perspective is all wrong. I think we would all be rebuked. All of us, because it's how we tend to focus and how we tend to see things. So that's the first major lesson. How is your thinking? How is your thinking? Is your thinking correct or is your thinking wrong? All right, now, the thing that they did focus on that I thought was good is this idea of being a stumbling block, and I'd not really thought about this before. Let me read the whole passage. I'm going to read it in a different translation. Matthew 16:23. Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You are a stumbling block. The New Living Translation. Jesus turned to Peter and said, get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. The ESV, but he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me. So we have stumbling block, dangerous trap, hindrance. Stumbling block, dangerous trap, hindrance. The King James puts it as an offense, I think is the way the King James puts it. Get thee behind me, Satan. Thou art an offense unto me. A trap, a stumbling block, a hindrance, an offense. So the first point was, how is your thinking? Now, how is your speaking? How are your words? Are your words an offense? Are your words a hindrance? Are your words a stumbling block? Now, in this particular case, Peter is being a hindrance, a trap, a stumbling block to Jesus, because Jesus in his humanity, in his flesh, as we see in the garden, he doesn't want to endure this suffering. He prays that God would remove the cup. So Peter is coming along saying, hey, don't do it. Don't do it. So that's an offense. That's a stumbling block. That's a hindrance. That's a trap being laid by Peter in front of Jesus in his humanity, in his flesh. And if it, in a sense, Jesus or Peter is tempting the flesh of Jesus. He's doing what Satan did when Satan tempted Jesus. He's tempting Jesus. He's trying to cause Jesus to stumble. He's being an offense to him. Peter is being an offense to Jesus, trying to cause him to stumble, setting a dangerous trap. Now, obviously, Jesus will fulfill the will of God because he's the eternal Son of God. He's perfect, he's without sin. But Peter is acting in that sense. He's causing a stumbling block. Now, obviously, we are not living in a situation where we're in the physical presence of Jesus so that we can try to tempt him with our words or try to be an offense to him or a stumbling block. But I think it is applicable that how is our thinking? All right. And then second, how are our words? And we'll use this in reference to, well, we speak to people every day. Are our words to others a dangerous trap? Are our words to other people a hindrance? Are our words to other people a stumbling block, an offense? Do we cause other people to stumble with our words, with the things that we say? Now, this is a powerful thing to consider as a Christian. You speak to people constantly. Are your words causing them to stumble spiritually, causing them to stumble in their spiritual life? Are you helping them or hurting them? Are you helping or hindering? Church members can ask themselves, are your words helpful or a hindrance to your pastor? Are you helping the pastor or hurting the pastor? How are your words? Now, sometimes with churchmen, it's the lack of words. They don't say anything. But are you helping or hurting? A pastor has to ask himself, is his words helping or hurting? Now, yes, sometimes rebuke can hurt, but you get the idea. Is your rebuke going to help or is it going to hurt? It's something that we have to consider. Are we being a stumbling block? Are we being a hindrance? We've all done it. Pastors do it. Church members do it. And then all of us, whenever we're engaging other people, are our words helping or hurting spiritually? Oh, here's a good one. Are your words on social media? Whoa, now we're going to get personal. Facebook. Are your words helping or hurting? Are you a hindrance? Now, this is very important. Are your words you're not helping, and you're definitely not helping, you're definitely hurting, you're definitely being a stumbling block if your words are false, if you're posting things that are not true, if you're posting lies and rumors and false information and conspiracy theories that are only hurting people. And then you have to ask yourself, and I've seen this with a lot of articles within Christendom during this whole COVID-19 pandemic. Many Christians are spending their time on social media fighting and arguing about we should do this or we shouldn't do this and trying to throw out stats and just arguing. All you're doing is causing division and fighting and stumbling over something that no one's really ever going to be able to prove instead of trying to be a help to people. We have to consider how our words are impacting other people. Would Jesus come into us and say, look, based off the way you speak to other people and the way you hurt other people and cause other people to stumble and you're a hindrance to other people, get thee behind me, Satan? Are you thinking like Satan? Are you speaking like Satan? Are you thinking like Satan and are you speaking like Satan? Now, there's two dynamics. Are we thinking like God? And if we're not thinking like God, then we're not going to speak like God. So, as a man thinketh, so is he. So there's two aspects to this. Peter did not have the things of God in mind. He had the things of men. And so guess what he speaks? He speaks the thoughts of men. He speaks the perspective of men. He speaks the perspective of Satan, the philosophy of Satan. He's literally standing in opposition to the will of God. So do we think in opposition to God, and then do we speak things that are in opposition to what God would want? Are we helping or hurting people? This is a powerful truth this morning. It's a powerful truth that we should spend some serious time considering today. All right, Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. I'm going to give you those two thoughts, those two ideas again. The mind of God versus the mind of men. So how are your thoughts? How is your thinking? And then your words. Are your words a stumbling block? Are your words a hindrance? Are your words a trap? Are your words an offense? How are your words? How is your thinking? How are your words? That to me is Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. Now, there's, I'll just stop right there. I've got some other scriptures that I could think of that I could go to. Obviously, we know in the book of James we're supposed to be slow to speak. I think sometimes the best way to protect ourselves is, well, first we got to examine our thinking and our speech. And then sometimes we have to realize less is more. Fewer words sometimes is better off. We have a less chance of causing people to stumble, setting a trap, and being an offense. But let's make sure we understand. It starts with our thinking, and we have to renew our minds. We have to get a biblical perspective on things. We have to ask ourselves, "Am I really thinking about this from a biblical perspective?" But yeah, I'll stop right there. That's some good stuff. That's some good stuff this morning. They went in a weird direction. And let me just make sure I state this and kind of make a theological argument for why I reject their perspective. Let's make sure we make this very clear. Because in the devotional, they went from Satan speaking through Peter to almost Satan, influencing our words or somehow speaking through us. Let's make this very clear. Satan is not omnipresent. He cannot be in all places at the same time. This is a constant thing I hear within Christianity. It drives me crazy. Whatever happens, Satan was there. Satan can't be everywhere. He's not omnipresent. Now, are you speaking of a demon? Okay. Are you speaking a demon is, following everyone around, trying to get us to do bad things? That's just a weird kind of doctrine about Satan and about demons. No, look, our heart is desperately wicked, deceitful above all things. It is from the heart that we speak like Satan. It's from inside of us that we think like Satan. We speak and think like Satan because we are a child of the devil by nature, and once we become saved, yes, but that old man still is there. That old nature, that old part of us as we were a child of the devil by birth. That's our natural state. It still shows itself. We still hear it. We still see it. It's still there. And sometimes it shows up. So I do not believe Peter was possessed. I don't believe Satan was speaking through him. I believe Peter, on his own, because of his own sinful nature, he was speaking in the place of Satan. He was acting like Satan. He was standing in opposition. He was an adversary to the will of God. And sometimes in our thinking, we're an adversary to the will of God. In our speech, sometimes we are an adversary to the will of God. Sometimes in our thinking, we think more like men, not like God. And sometimes in our speech, we cause people to stumble. We put a hindrance in front of people. We put a trap in front of people through our words. And if our words are causing people to stumble, cause people to offend people, hurt people, then we need to correct those words as soon as we can. All right, I'll stop right there. Thank you for listening to this Sunday morning devotional thought. We'll be back at 10 a.m. for the for the Sunday school hour. We'll be doing some catechesis. We're looking at 5 Latin words. So if you haven't been listening, just join us for Sunday school, and then you can go back and catch up on all the things we've been doing with there. And then the goal for the morning worship hour will be Romans chapter 5, verses 1 through 3. So that's the goal. Join us. And if you need any help in how to listen to us live this morning, email me quickly at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. All right, that's my Sunday morning devotional study time. Hopefully it's been beneficial to you. Give me your thoughts. newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. We'll be back shortly. God bless.